Have you wondered about living elsewhere in your retirement? Well, we have almost daily. No, it's not a simple decision, especially when two people are involved.
Hi, this is
Gil
and Gene of Retire There, a podcast about retirement destinations. We live in Brooklyn, New York. Having grown up and worked in this area of the country, we're hoping to relocate when we're both retired. For us, it's the weather, the chaos, the noise, and the yearning to be near nature and not within 3 feet of human beings.
That's right. In February 2020, we embarked on our journey to find that special place. We spent a week in Winter Park, Florida, which is beautiful, but something said it wasn't for us. As we were planning for the next trip, the pandemic arrived. Gene then gave birth.
I gave birth?
To this podcast. With so many baby boomers retiring, many must be relocating. Why not connect with and learn from them?
Here's a little background about us.
I'm Asian, born in Brazil, and grew up in Flatbush, Brooklyn. I'm an engineer turned attorney turned podcaster. I recently retired from a university career practicing higher education law. I love the academic environment, but it was time to do something else. I no longer have to set an alarm, drive in BQE traffic, or work with people who don't always share the same principles. Ooh, did I just say that? You bet I did. I traded all that in to binge crime dramas into the wee hours, just a little bit, to develop the podcast, to volunteer, practice metalsmithing, tackle our possessions. No regrets so far. Gene?
I'm not Asian, and as Gil mentioned, I'm not retired. I'm just plain tired.
Oh.
Born and raised in Long Island, New York, a place I always wanted to leave. I'm a law librarian working in a court who loves his job, but we're retired by the time we select our ideal location. We will be speaking to folks from across the street to across the globe who have moved to their dream venues and more. So please stay tuned and remember, if you know anyone who has moved anywhere for retirement, let us know.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. On today's episode of Retire There, we'll be chatting with Tim and Amy Rutherford, another nomadic couple. Unlike our previous episode about senior nomads living from Airbnb to Airbnb, the Rutherfords retired in their late 40s and live just about anywhere in terms of housing. They house sit as well as rent Airbnbs for 1 to 3 months, then off to a new location. They are part of the FIRE movement, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. Tim and Amy explain that they've been house sitting since 2015. They take care of the pets and homes of mostly strangers. There's no money paid in either direction. They sold their Colorado home and officially set up their domicile in Texas. The Rutherford state, if you're not going to have a home, it's not a bad idea to pick a tax advantage state. Texas has no state income tax, which affect their investments. They set up an enhanced mail service that acts as their home address in the United States. In January 2020, their third child left the nest and they became full-time houseless nomads. In 2021, nearly 70% of their nights were spent house sitting in places that included San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and San Miguel de Allende. In 2022, they booked sits in Spain, Edinburgh, and Puerto Vallarta. And each week, they shared their story on YouTube as Go With Less. Folks, that is the site. You want to learn anything and everything about these two and their adventures and their lifestyles and anything you want to learn. And there's a lot to learn here. Go to Go With Less, one word. Okay, so a little background about Amy and Tim. Gene?
Amy was born and raised in East Brunswick, New Jersey. She attended Boston University and thereafter worked in business-to-business sales. And then while living in New York City, she was employed by news organizations, including the Associated Press and Dow Jones. In 2001, Amy moved to the Denver area and retired from advertising at the age of 46. Wow, that's great. Now, she and her husband, Tim, publish a YouTube channel about early retirement, house sitting, and travel hacking. Her interests include the performing arts, film, food, and travel. Amy says she's a natural yenta and matches people with like-minded friends all over the world. The goal of our Facebook group, she says, is getting people to meet in person, and it's working. I like the part about Yenta. Tim was born and raised in Kilgore, Texas. He attended Texas A&M for undergrad and the University of Denver for grad school. He sold and supported telecommunications infrastructure, worked for telecommunications equipment manufacturers like Nortel and 3Com. Tim also retired in his 40s. As to his interests, he spends hours a day following news about points and miles. The couple has nearly 30 active credit cards. Woo. He also is an avid fan of technology, phones, cameras, computers, gadgets, etc. Tim has 3 children from a previous marriage, and they're all in their 20s. Gil?
So guys, thank you so much for joining Retire There. So you retired early, have 3 kids, and traveled all over the globe. We have many questions, and we will be including your YouTube channel, Go With Less, in the show notes for everyone to check out. So the first big question, you were both unemployed after you left your jobs. How did you handle healthcare in your 40s while you traveled all over?
Okay, I will take this one. And some of it we learned after the fact. So we left our jobs, both of us, in 2015, and we needed to start our independent healthcare in January 1st of 2016. We lived in Colorado. We were on the ACA, the Affordable Care Act in Colorado, and had a great plan, 2016 and 2017. Terrific. We loved it. 2018 rolls around. Number one, our healthcare plan had stripped all of the doctors we had had for 15 years out of our plan that we loved. So we ended up signing up for the cheapest plan. That was fairly disastrous because I couldn't. It was also an ACA plan in Colorado, but a no-name plan. Weren't able to make any appointments with any doctors. They weren't accepting, even though they showed in the network, they weren't accepting new patients.
Wow.
So yes. And so in June of that same year, that would have been 2018, we decided to opt into what's called a health sharing ministries. And that was something called Liberty Health Shares. Now, just back up a teeny bit, 6 months, we learned after 2 years that our Colorado ACA did not cover us outside of Colorado. So the whole time we thought that it was like our corporate health insurance. And if we went to other states in the US, that we would be covered. We learned 2 years into it that wasn't true. So we were thankful that we hadn't learned the hard way. We kind of learned by accident at renewal.
And we subsequently learned that this seems to be a common feature of the ACA plans. We've heard that in some instances, you're only covered in the county where you purchased your coverage. So it's very sometimes restrictive. So you really, if you're interested in the ACA, you really need to understand what you're signing up for when you get it.
And it's really buyer beware. So just because we assume we have it everywhere, we didn't. And even though we may have had coverage, we had no out-of-pocket maximum. And that's the problem. So people will say, well, you did have coverage. I said, well, with no out-of-pocket maximum, it doesn't really matter. So then we started this health sharing ministries because in June of 2018, because we wanted to be able to pick our own doctors and we wanted coverage. We travel extensively. So we wanted coverage for the inside the US because travel insurance didn't include us. It only included us outside of the US. So we started with Liberty Health Shares with the ACA. We did them concurrently. So we were on another ACA plan in 2019 in Colorado. That was our last year in Colorado before we sold our home and became nomads. And then we were only on Liberty Health Shares only for 2020 because our intent was to be out of the country after we sold our home. And then COVID had us grounded. So that kind of messed things up. Well, now we are on what we hope is our good long-term plan. That's an expat plan with a company called IMG Global. It's affordable. We have options and our option includes us in all over the United States. So now we have true healthcare everywhere. And this is the first time I could say that since we retired 7 years ago.
Yeah, and two things about the IMG Global. Number one, the plan that we're signed up for requires that we're out of the country for 6 months, out of the United States for 6 months out of the year. And then also something, if you are looking at some insurance that's not an ACA plan or corporate insurance, you're almost certainly going to have to go through underwriting, which means you're going to have, if you have any pre-existing conditions, those are going to be excluded. And so like I had back surgery 2016, and that's not covered with our current IMG Global
back
plan.
Issues.
Any back issues, right? So they want to exclude anything that they're aware of.
But this is the question we're asked most from our viewers and from people that we meet. This is the question that takes up a lot of time.
Yes.
What to do.
Yeah.
And the reality is not, the best answer is to leave the United States.
Yeah,
is the answer that we've come up with. Mm-hmm. And that's probably why a big reason why your podcast exists is because of all these international options for better healthcare.
Yeah. Now we started the podcast, interestingly enough, within the US because it was for selfish reasons. We wanted to move. And even though we wanted to travel, it was mainly in the United States until we decided that lately we're probably going to have a home base here and travel abroad. But aside from that, I do want to ask you, the Liberty health chairs, what kind of costs are we talking about? Obviously, it's less than Cobra.
They were very nominal. So maybe, and they have increased several times. So somewhere, maybe $300 for the couple. They have different words than normal insurance. So they don't call them premiums. They don't call them deductibles, but we're just going to call them premiums and deductibles because that's kind of the gist of it. And our big problem with it was that they were very late paying any claims, and and filing claims was so laborious that we didn't file claims. So because we had like I said, our deductible is very reasonable, is roughly $1,500 to $2,000 a couple. So we didn't even have healthcare expenses that high. We decided we'll file if we have some big whoppers, and thankfully they didn't come. So we just stopped filing because it was a hassle.
We don't really have any horrible stories about our experience with Liberty Health Shares, but it's something about it just didn't. It isn't real insurance, and so when they're regulated in a different way, and
they're not regulated.
They're not regulated.
Oh, they're not regulated.
And so they sort of make it up as they go, it seems. And so
we wanted more traditional. We wanted insurance.
Yeah. Wow. Well, the fear is always the catastrophic, right? I mean, for us, it's always if we go off, what do we do? It's that issue, unless you're outside the U.S.
I learned something quickly on this show. I had always thought when you had international insurance, it only covered outside the U.S. I hadn't heard of a company that covered also the U.S. Is IMG Global the only company you know of that does that?
No, I think there are
several.
There are several.
Oh, there are.
And so, and I think all of them have similar requirements that you can buy a plan that only covers you when you're outside of the States, or you can buy a plan with a higher premium that covers you both when you're in the States and when you're out. But like ours has this requirement that you're out of the country for 180 days. Mm-hmm. The same thing I think is true of other providers as well.
Okay. So
that's good to know, though.
Sense. Yeah. So you have to be out of the U.S. 6 months out of the year in order for that to work well, or to work. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
I have a question about fire. I know there are many versions of fire, at least 9, I believe. But the ones I've heard of are lean fire, fat fire, fart fire.
Fart fire?
I don't know that one.
I don't know that one.
I don't know that one. What are
that's your own? Is that your own?
I'm going to go with fart fire.
That is not my own. I read it at least 4 different places. I read it. I swear. I don't know what it is though. Okay. But lean fire and fat fire. What are those? And what do you consider yourself in the fire movement?
Okay, so lean fire, and here's the thing, it's not the Webster's dictionary of fire, it's individuals creating these definitions,
right?
So they're not exact. So it just started with fire, and then it started having these little branches out of fire. So lean fire was, if you're spending $40,000 or less, you're lean fire. Fat fire has 2 definitions that are very different. One of them has been if you have spending of over $100,000 a year, you're a fat fire, or $2.5 million in invested assets. Oh. Now, Tim and I, so we say that we're lean fire spending, or at least we were, because we've recently given ourselves a raise. So we were lean fire spending on more fat fire assets. And so it's kind of, and there's coast fire where people they've already saved for retirement. They just have a job to get them to retirement. Barista fire for your health insurance.
Okay.
Oh, that's
so
funny.
That's very cool. And you also then allow yourself splurges, right? Even if you're in lean fire. Okay.
Yes. And I think we're out of lean fire because we were at $36,000 for several years. Mm-hmm. We're now at $48,000 with January 1st of 2022. We gave ourselves a bump and raise because accommodations we find are more expensive now.
And we don't spend with a traditional budget. It's not like we have $1,000 a month allocated to housing or anything like that. We just spend, and we were naturally trending towards spending about $3,000 a month. That sort of worked out to $36,000 a year. And then we would track our spending. So we think that it's very important to understand what you're spending, but we didn't have a traditional budget. And then this last year, we had a lot of extraordinary expenses. as well as we're all hearing this inflation thing. It's impacting us as well, especially with housing when we do pay. And so we decided to give ourselves a raise because using the 4% rule, which is something your audience may or may not be familiar with, we have the ability to spend what we're looking to spend this year. We've just always spent way less than that.
Okay. So you guys spent actually less than the 4%?
Way less.
Wow.
Way
Wow.
less. Way less.
Okay.
The same principles that allowed us to retire early, spending less than we needed or that we had, it still is in our fire life. We're still very, very careful. And not only is it like that with our investments, it's also like that with our points and miles. We're frugal, period. That's how we come. But as you said, we do have lots of splurges. So because we have a lot of zeros into our accommodations because of house sitting, we splurge hard on food and dining. I'm a former New Yorker. I think we travel for the food. Tim and I are food obsessed, and we splurge all over the place all the time, several times a week on dining.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Can you walk our audience through your initial housing situation? So you lived in Colorado, but I read somewhere you also had a townhouse, right? And now you have a domicile. And then later in the show, we want to talk about Mexico, which you had mentioned as well. And I know that's a mouthful, but I'll let you take it.
When we decided to fire, we were living in a 6,000 square foot house. So not all of that was finished, but we had a giant house in Colorado.
Huge.
One of the things we realized is that house we called it an albatross. It was just all the expenses associated with the house were weighing us down. And we decided that if we were able to sell the house and get out of this huge money pit, then that's really what allowed us to fire. So when we moved out of our giant house, we owned a townhome that I owned before Amy and I got married. We moved into that townhome, which was about 1,500 square feet. Is that right?
Wow.
I always get that square footage.
And where in Colorado?
Parker, Colorado, which is a southern Denver suburb. So we moved into this townhome and we were there for a while. And then once we decided to become nomadic, we sold that, and everything that we had left, we moved into a 5x10 storage unit. And so that's the only thing that we have left is a storage unit with the remainder of our belongings, which is we don't have any furniture left. We don't have any
no lamps, no rugs.
Nothing
we do
like
have
that.
Art pieces. We have a lot of memento stuff. That was hard to get rid of.
Some clothes. And then once we did that, we moved into the storage unit and we sold our house in January of 2020. And then we domiciled in Texas, which basically means we have a fancy mailing address in Texas. And so after the Patriot Act, you can't just have like a UPS box as your mailing address. You have to have a real address. And this is true for banking and a variety of other things. For whatever reasons, this particular facility in Texas, it's called the Escapees RV Club. They're designed predominantly to support people in RVs. We don't know what the percentage is, but we believe people like us represent a fairly small percentage of the people that work with them. It's mostly RV folks.
People who have no address.
It's people who have no address. If you live in an RV, you don't have an address. And so this is why they exist. And they're not only are they in Texas, I think they're in Florida and South Dakota as well. But places where they're low income tax places.
And we have driver's licenses, voter registration until November 2021. We had a car for almost 2 years registered there. We have a blog that's registered there. So we had our Texas ACA was what we did in 2021. So we have become, Texas is our home state. If we were going to have a home state, it's Texas. Right. The good news is with being domiciled, you don't have to be there. You don't have to own anything there. So that is all optional.
Here's something kind of cool.
Wow.
Amy and I just went through this exercise. I went through this exercise 2 days ago. I got a jury duty summons. And so this is problematic if you aren't in the States. And so the cool thing about this town where this Escapees is that the town completely understands what's going on with this RVing community. When I said, I'm not going to be there, they're like, I want to be excused. One of the things on the list of reasons why you want to be excused is I'm a member of the Escapees RV Club. That's all I had to say. They excused me from jury duty.
But this was really big for me because I have been sequestered in a hotel with a guard outside of my door for jury duty. I was summoned to grand jury duty to show up for every Friday for a year. So I have had the extreme of jury duty. So when I got called first, of course, so I've had that they will send out a warrant for my arrest if I don't show up for jury duty. And I had a job that did not allow a lot of time off. So the fact that we could just check off, I'm a member of and we don't have to come back from Thailand or Indonesia or wherever to come do jury duty. That alone makes this RV escapees worth its weight in gold. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. I'm really curious about what makes you, Amy, somebody who would be picked so readily for a jury. Must be something.
Love to know that. You guys are in the legal profession, aren't you? You tell me.
Well, we always get out of it. I did have to serve grand jury duty though.
I've always wanted to do it. I know,
but they always find out you're a lawyer.
They throw you off. Yeah.
When I was sequestered, it was in Manhattan. It was kind of cool.
So now, what about the kids? Are they with you part of the time? So when you guys went houseless or homeless, where did the kids go?
Yep, they're all independent in different ways. And so our oldest son is currently at home with his mom. Our middle son is in school in Colorado, and our daughter is in school in Boston. So they're they're all independent, living their own lives. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and since I was married previously, my ex-wife has a home. Their grandparents are also in Colorado, so they have lots of roofs that are available for them to sleep under.
All right. So next question is, as I understand it, you house sit, so no more rent, no more mortgage, or any housing costs. The other expenses, such as flights, meals, and entertainment, they then come out of your investments, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Does that require a lot of transactions wherever you go?
They have 30 credit cards, so they have a lot of free flights.
Yeah. Let's talk about the financial side of it. So you use your credit cards, but you have your investments, right? Why don't you share with the audience how that works?
And one quick thing also, we don't exclusively house sit. So we're currently paying for lodging in Guadalajara, Mexico. That's last year we did more than usual. About 70% of our nights were in house sits.
Nice. And there was a big reason. It was because we were kind of stuck with COVID in the expensive United States, and Airbnbs doubled in price. So we were just kind of waiting for the world to open up, just like everybody else was. Well, now that the world is opening up, we're paying for a lot more. And that was always the plan. The plan was about 50% house sits in the beginning. And I think we're moving more toward that as things hopefully kind of start to normalize a little bit.
Okay.
But our investments are kind of, we like them boring. So they're in ETFs and mutual funds, some bonds. We have no more real estate whatsoever. We do have some cash because we owned our townhouse outright. And when we sold it, we actually were too gun shy to put that into investments because of the timing. And in the meantime, the market just keeps going up. So we haven't had, over our history though, we have had to make withdrawals. We've been retired for close to 7 years. So we are withdrawing our nest egg, and that's quite a difference after a whole lifetime of saving. To start withdrawing is a real mental shift. And even 7 years later, it's not always so easy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We know that the math works, but it's again, when you've been saving and you're trying to, if you don't have any more income coming in, aside from appreciating assets and investments, that definitely is something to think of mentally.
Why so many credit cards, Tim?
Points and miles. It's all about the points and miles. As a matter of fact, we just put together a video today. We just signed up for 3 new credit cards at the end of the year that are going to give us about $6,500 worth of value. And so just 3 credit cards are going to give us that much value, because we'll have a Southwest Airlines companion pass through this credit card sign up. And then we'll have 125,000 American Express membership reward points. And so we keep signing up for them because the way that you get the most value from credit cards is with sign up bonuses. So every time you sign up for something new, you get a ton of value. We won't sign up for a new credit card unless we get at least $500 in net value in the first year of having the card. And so these 3 cards that we signed up for at the end of the year, obviously that $6,500 is a lot more than $500
that's nice.
And so it's
But does having so many credit cards lower your credit score?
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact,
you pay them all, right?
It has the potential to. So it's not just paying them off. Well, certainly paying them off is important. So we don't have any. So there's a debt to income ratio. So sort of the more credit cards you have, the more credit available you have to you. And so That impacts your score because you want to keep that metric low in terms of how much debt you have against the available credit. That's one metric. Also, keeping credit cards open for a really long time increases a metric that's the age of your credit. That's another metric that's important. I think a lot when I was a kid, it's like if you have a credit card and you're not using it, you need to cut it up and just sort of get rid of it. Really, that's bad advice with the current credit modeling, because the longer you keep a credit line open, the longer that metric is going to rise in terms of the age of your credit score. And so that's something you want to have. What's another reason to have the cards open?
You get all kinds of perks from them. So we just also did a video about, we have 5 cruises booked for about $5,000 total. Oh. Yeah. And this was just through credit card perks. We didn't use points and miles. So we actually paid for the whole thing on our credit cards, not with points, not with some sort of free cash instrument. Yeah. Still with all, because of our credit cards, we have status matching. Mm-hmm. We have perks that like if you spend $1,500 on Royal Caribbean, get $400 on your statement, stuff like that. And so we find that having all these credit cards, Tim thankfully does all the management of them, and he is very active. I do all of our house sitting. He does all of our travel hacking.
Okay. So you're a spreadsheet king.
I love a spreadsheet.
Yeah, me too. I have so many.
How do you find these house sitting gigs, and how do people trust you?
That is such a good question. I think that our entire lives are built upon trust. So you have to come with trust is number one. So for people who say, I could never have someone in my home, then you probably shouldn't have a house sitter in your home or be a house sitter. So we come trusting. Somehow I was a New Yorker for many years, the very, very trusting person. But there are websites out there that are kind of like dating websites. And so the biggest one in the world is called Trusted House Sitters. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sits, often in places where there are expats. You're not going to find a lot of them, for example, in like Cambodia. If there's 3 a year, that would be like about right. So, but they're in Paris or in France, there might be 400 of them a year.
Wow.
So yeah, so we've had 2 fantastic sits in France. We just booked, we have 2, we have Edinburgh and Oxford, UK are coming up this summer. We have 2 sits in Sitges, Spain, on the coast of Spain.
Wow.
And those are actually from our viewers. But it's just a site, and you have a whole profile that has pictures and ultimately reviews from other homeowners. They put up pictures of hopefully their home and their pets and talk a little bit about what, like selling their home and telling what the expectations are. It's really cool because when you have money out of the whole equation, it really is it's a really tight relationship. It can be. I mean, you're sleeping in their bed, you're often driving their car, sitting on their couch with their pets, texting them photos every day. So it's a very different kind of a relationship. And we found very, very good friends with these homeowners we've been doing it we retired since 2015. So it's a really special relationship based fully upon trust. And we go back over and over to several of these houses because we fall in love with the pets.
That's great. You ever had any problems with dogs or cats or any other animals?
We've had all kinds of problems. So I've said if a cat or dog is lost or dies based on our negligence, we're likely never house sitting again. So we are uber careful about the pets in our care, the house in our care, more so than we were with our own pets in our own house, because we know how guilty we would be. I mean, there's maybe like an unhouse broken pet that we weren't warned about. That would be about the worst of it. And even so, those are always little teeny dogs. All the unhouse broken dogs are always little ones.
No offense, but they're the worst, those little dogs.
Oh, they are not. They are not.
Goodness. When I used to run, yap, 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 yap. They run after, they try to bite you. Big dogs are fine.
You're going to have audience complaints.
That's fine.
All right. So I have to tell you, I looked at that website and I was amazed. So I'm looking at all of them, and every one of them almost has a pet, which makes sense because if it's just plants, I guess you can kind of use those slow drip systems to keep them alive. I was looking for plants, hopefully, because, I love plants and I could live with them. Are there any that, I guess they're all animals that you mainly take care of, right? There was one actually that I toyed with, and it's in Burlington, Vermont, and that's chickens. So I think I could handle chicken feed. I wouldn't have to carry them, wash them, or do anything like that. But Tim, you were saying something?
Well, we've watched chickens as well, but I was going to say that 99% plus probably of the sits that are available involve pets. The ones that do not have pets are typically like in the Caribbean in hurricane season, and you need to make sure the house doesn't blow down, sort of things.
However, maybe they have an extensive garden that needs hours of watering every day in the summertime for weeks. So usually there's a reason. I think that people should have a house sitter anytime they go away, because we have had circumstances that thank goodness we were there. We've had a few of them. So we were in one house sit, all of the farm. We were just watching television. They had a lot of bathrooms. One of the bathrooms we'd never even entered. We heard this gushing and we rush out to the bathroom and the water's hitting the ceiling, clean water. A gasket broke.
The feed line to the toilet had just given way and the water was
just...
we weren't there. Their house would have been flooded. It would have been tens of thousands.
And they were gone for 6 weeks. So if someone was just caring for the outside animals, then that would have been a problem. But we've had a couple of things like that where there was a bird that got loose in the house because of the ductwork. There was some problem that the duct there was a big nest in the attic. It came out through the ductwork, live bird in the house, stuff like that. Tim had to catch the bird. So there's stuff like that if you have a house, things happen. Imagine if like a kid threw accidentally like a ball or a rock through your window, or a car kicked up a rock. Like you'd want to have someone like checking out your house more often than once every week or two. And that's what a house sitter does. And the fact that you don't pay them, I think this is one of the best deals in the universe.
But you've never had to, you never experienced anything where there was a dispute that the parties couldn't handle, right? I mean,
not even
pretty. Okay.
And I think things like that happen. We've never had that experience, but Amy was a moderator in a large house sitting forum, and she's heard every story imaginable about crazy stuff. And so crazy things do happen, but luckily, I think part of the reason we haven't had crazy stuff is because Amy participated in that forum and sort of knows the right questions to ask and make sure we do a good job of vetting.
Now, have you ever had a homeowner cancel at the last minute and then you get stuck?
24 when we stopped counting over COVID.
What?
24?
Yes. Oh. Yes. And each house sit.
Prior to COVID, 0.
Prior to COVID for 5 years, 0. And then COVID, we stopped counting at 24. But we were scheduled in Malaysia and Scotland and France and all over the place. And of course, with COVID, that all changed. And then even after travel was safe, just flights are changing. So right. And so this is all coinciding with all these house sits canceling. We had a whole year, 2020, when we started as nomads in the first week of January 2020. We had the entire year booked. Flights, everything. Everything fell apart in February because one of our sits was going to Japan. Starting in February, everything started canceling. And here we were as brand new nomads. It was a real lesson very, very fast in nomadic living. And I think that it gave us like 10 years of nomad experiences in 1 or 2. And now we have a lot more flexibility. So the other, maybe a month ago, we had a house sit. He was supposed to go to New Zealand. He's from there. He's in Palm Springs. He wrote us and said, they're quarantining. I'm not going to go. And Tim and I said, literally, we didn't even blink. 2 years ago, that would have sent us into a bit of a tailspin. We said, we'll just stay in delightful Guadalajara here. Like, no problem. And so we've come, our arc has really, we're not at the end because we're really just getting going internationally now.
Right.
We've had to become very flexible.
Yeah. I was going to say, and both of you probably have very similar outlook on travel, right? That you are able to kind of handle these last minute issues without having a meltdown, or like my anxiety we'd probably kill each other. We'd be dead by now, I think, if you and
2 years ago, we might have been.
Now, let me ask you, what are best and worst financial lessons you've learned through this journey? I know there's a lot. Take your pick.
Let's see. The best and worst. I'm going to say that maybe the best and worst lesson we have are sort of rolled into one. And this was this home ownership thing. So with our financial journey, the home that we bought, I think we paid a premium for it. We've never had a lot of luck with real estate. By the way, I think we're an anomaly with people that fire. So many people in the space, real estate's a big part of their puzzle. For us, real estate, we've never made a lot of money with real estate ever. As a matter of fact,
I don't think we've ever made any money.
Really?
Our big house, when we sold it, I think we sold it basically for what we paid for it, but we had put $100,000 into it. So at the end of the day, we actually lost money on that transaction.
During a hot market.
Yeah.
So
Oh my goodness.
This big house, we said it was going to be our forever home. This was the place where we bought it with that being the intention that this was a place we were going to be forever. I think through that process, we realized, number one, that we didn't need a big fancy home to have a life like we wanted to have.
Sure.
And then number two, this is from a financial standpoint, it wasn't an investment for us. It was simply a roof over our head that we didn't appreciate as much as maybe some other people do. But I think that was our best and worst lesson, was our big fancy house.
But it gave us experience of doing it. So we know that we don't have this American dream of a big McMansion. We did it. We don't like it. We don't want it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we'll ever own a home again. So we really like this idea of freedom. So core at the FIRE movement is freedom.
Right.
So freedom, period. Not just freedom to go where you want to go and freedom to work or not to work, but freedom to be able to move around and maybe to move where we're very driven by good weather. So we're the Goldilocks with like 60 to 90 degrees. We don't want to deviate outside of these. And so not owning a home allows us to move with the weather, to move where our friends might be, and just to have that flexibility.
And like Amy said, and I may be repeating what she said, but sort of the best being that if we never owned that home, we wouldn't know that we don't want to still have that in our life. So the fact that we had it in our life and now it's gone, it's like, well, we don't need to have that. So we might still be aspiring to that. We might still be working if we never had that big fancy home, thinking that that's what we really wanted.
And I'm going to give one too about the one of the lessons is that we would always review our spending. So we would review our spending twice a year, every single dollar that we spent. And we wouldn't really do much about it because we both had good earning jobs, well-paid jobs. And we'd look at it. We didn't have debt outside of our mortgage. We had still plenty of savings, but we spent a lot. We spent $115,000 a year. We're now at about $40,000 a year is where we are now. Wow. And we're happier for it. But what we learned is that if we had known about this FIRE movement earlier, we would have been saving a lot more, because it's really the key of earning and saving, earning a lot and saving a lot are really paramount to having this. If you want to leave work early, the workforce early, that's really a big part of it. So had we not had so much spending, we would have had more savings, and had we known about this earlier, we would have done it earlier. I mean, it's the best time of our lives But
I'll tell you, I think you guys learned at a really good time, despite, I mean, I've heard people in their 30s, but to me, your career teaches you a lot as well. So, you went through that instead of just doing it at 25. I mean, there's so many groups that done all that, all the famous books and the Bogleheads, and all those. I mean, I learned actually later than you guys. We're in a good spot now, thank God. I'm actually going to handle my big rollover next week over to Vanguard because I've been with them now for a short time. But for me, that was a learning, it was a lesson well learned. But I don't know that we'll be doing any kind of firework anytime soon. And let me ask you,
we're too old for that.
We're too old for that? No. There's a group called Fire After 50, and and they're still learning. And I think it's never kind of too late if you're stuck with no savings and your bad habits continue with you all through retirement, and you're only living on Social Security, which many Americans are doing and will do.
It's amazing.
Now, let me ask you a couple of short questions first. Do you still have that storage unit?
We do.
So that's going to kind of stay with you. But it's small, you said, right? It's 5x5 or something?
5x10.
5x10.
It's not bad.
Okay. And do you guys, as you travel throughout the country and the world, you don't purchase much, I assume, right? Because you went through that whole purging.
We don't have any place to put it.
I will say that when we were in the U.S. for 2 years, we had our SUV and we did accumulate. So the deal is what we have learned for us is that whatever our space is, we will be filling it. Whether it's a 6,000 foot house, a 5x10 storage, or an SUV or a suitcase, we will be filling it. Okay. So when we had our SUV, all the stuff that we had gotten rid of, we bought. So we bought a salad spinner and a yoga mat, weights, and additional pairs of shoes, and Tupperware, and all of that.
Well, necessities. Yeah, those are necessities.
Stuff. And then we go to all these places, and just to make life a little better, we're like, well, we'll just spend $20 on a bathroom scale or measuring cups or things like that. And then we had to give them all away again, just in November.
I got to tell you, I keep getting that salad spinner, and it takes so much damn room.
I know you put so many of those.
I know, because the salads are wet. So, you buy the stupid thing.
Yes. We've given away 2 Instant Pots, and I love Instant Pots. And we were traveling with we gave away an Instant Pot. We accumulated another one. We had to get rid of a second Instant Pot.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about Instant Pots. Do you cook much while you're in somebody's house?
We do. So it depends. So we we're big into cooking, actually. So it depends upon how long we're here is really the answer. So if we're in a hotel, probably not at all. So we try to find a decent space with a kitchen. Some are better than others. House sits, that's a really big, there's a lot of really good things for house sitting other than saving money, which is big. But one of them is that you live like a true local, like you're in the neighborhood with the pets. You're walking the pets. You're seeing the neighbors. They know you because they know the pets. So there's as a matter of fact, some of our neighbors from a recent house sit are coming to visit us in Guadalajara next week. Yeah. So this is just the neighbors. Like we became dear friends with them for life. But another one is a lot of the house have fabulous kitchens,
right?
And like our Airbnbs have like the worst of the pots and pans in all of them, the worst knives, the worst, like just stuff just to be cheap because people aren't going to take good care of it. They're going to run things to the dishwasher. But house sits tend to have nice kitchens. So not all of them, but everything. So better than we like really. So that's where we do a lot of cooking is when we're in the house sit.
Okay.
And also they also have so we bring some of the stuff, but they have condiments. So we don't have to buy all the sesame oil and red chili paste and every single thing for a couple of weeks. We don't have to buy that. We could just use a little dab of theirs.
Where have you spent the longest amount of time during a house sit?
Actually, I had major surgery in March of 2021. Then we get in a car, which was awful. I drove 4 days to Silver Spring, Maryland, which was right on the outskirts. It was a Washington, D.C. suburb. So the good news is that we were there for 3 months and I was able to recover. I needed 6 full weeks to recover there. The car ride probably did some damage. And then my parents lived there too. So it was really nice as nomads. I've never lived anywhere near my parents as an adult. So we got to have a lot of quality time. I have 2 sets of parents. So I got to see both sets of parents actually while we were out on the East Coast. So that was 3 months. And that actually, so we're finding that like we're here in Guadalajara for 2 weeks. 2 months. 2 months feels pretty good. So we feel like we live here. So after it takes about a month to really feel like this is home.
Right.
And so 1 to 2 months. So if you leave it a month, which is fine, and we do it, then you're kind of not really having that settled in feeling so much. And then, so it's really at the 1 to 2 months where you have your deeper friendships and like you really have more of a routine and you're not rushing to get all your activities in.
Right. And you don't have to worry then based on your timing about the visa issue, right? If you're under 90 days, you don't have to keep applying for these other places and so forth.
Well, it depends on where we are. So we're in Europe next summer for 88 days. You're only allowed to get 90 days for all of the Schengen zone. We've counted. We're at 88 days. If we were allowed, we would have been there for an extra cruise. Yeah. But no, we do still have to. So we don't have a long. We have 3 week, 2 week house sits back to back, like all over the place. They're not that long because we wanted to move around a little bit and experience more of Europe.
Right, within that 90-day period.
The visa thing is if it weren't for visas, visas and the weather affect a lot of our life.
Because we're thinking that we're going to spend 5 months here, maybe 6 months there, so that might be an issue. So we're going to have to do a little more homework and make sure that it's easier to manage.
It's going to be 3 months.
Yeah, well, we might do
6 months. 6 months in Mexico.
No. We're thinking like 6 months somewhere in Europe. So we'll see. I mean, we're not going to move anywhere where we need a retirement visa. At least not today. We're not quite there yet.
And here's what you could do is you could do 3 months in New York or wherever, 3 months in Europe, 3 months back out, and then 3 months.
Yeah.
As long as it's not consecutive.
Right.
And I haven't even been a big traveler, so we'll see what happens. This is just like pie in the sky right now. What about in terms of tracking your spending? Do you use any special apps that help you manage your travels and your budget?
Yep. So we use, I've been using Quicken since I got out of college. So a long time, a lot of my life. So we have a lot of data in Quicken. We also use Mint. which is an app. And then we also have a little travel app. So we have, for different reasons, we use all these different tools. And so the nice thing about Quicken is it's a real database with real information. Any report you want about your spending is there, but it costs, I don't know, $50 a year or something like that. The subscription is not, it used to be you could go years without renewing. They've changed the model. I still like Quicken. It's a very robust app. Also, the nice thing is you can, if you spend on a credit card, all of that information is just feeds into the tool. Same thing's true of Mint. Mint is free. And so, I like Mint just to give us a quick glance at our numbers. It's easy for that, specifically our spending. And we use a fourth app as well. Personal Capital we use for looking at our investments. And so it does a good job. It also will help you track your spending, but I don't like it for that. I like it for looking at investments. It's also a free app. But it's better for looking at that stuff. The
travel app Tim mentioned is called Travel Spend, and we put in manually because we spend a lot of cash here in Mexico. So we're not putting things like our health insurance in. Right. We're like, how much does it cost for us to be in Guadalajara is what we're wanting to track. So we like to track. We love, obviously, we have 4 apps. We love tracking things. We love spreadsheets. We love numbers.
Right. It's part of what you do. I mean, you have to.
We love it, and it's part of how we got here. So this is who we are, and both of us love it. So we love a spreadsheet, and we talk about it all the time.
Now, let me ask you, when you travel from house sit to house sit, are you traveling with the same luggage? Obviously, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're not going back to a home.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. So everything is in what? How many pieces of luggage do the two of you have?
Well, currently, I'm just going to say what we aspire. By the time we leave here, we will have a backpack each and a bag that we have to check, a suitcase that's like a medium-sized bag that we have to check.
And
so we realized, and that's the kind of bag, we had a similar set of baggage before we came down to Mexico, but we had a carry-on and a little backpack. We realized that the carry-on wasn't going to be a size when we go to Europe that would be allowed for carry-on. So we upgraded our bag to have this medium-sized bag that's just going to go under. Anytime we get on a plane, our plan is to have to check bag.
I get bored with stuff. So I travel with too many clothes. And the reality is for 2 years, we were in a car able to have a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so here we are, even though we've been nomads for 2 years, where the get it all in a piece of luggage is a different story. And we carry all kinds of gear for our videos, lights and tripods and cameras. So that takes up a sizable amount of space. But so I have a lot of clothes, and I have no doubt that I'll be paring down. Well, maybe Tim will, but I'll be paring down. But I think it's a process. And people who have been doing it for a really, really long time, who are at like carry-on luggage, look at us with great judgment, and it's a process, and we're fine with it.
Last week we went to Texas. For 2 nights we were in Texas dealing with some business, and we took just our little backpacks with us. And it is quite liberating to have just that little amount of luggage. So we basically had fresh underwear and got to brush our teeth, and that was it.
So for 2 days of travel, I took 4 pairs of underwear.
Well, just in case, when you're a woman, you never know.
Plus, or period, it was hot. It was 90 degrees. I take 2 showers a day sometimes. So
yeah. Well, COVID has definitely reduced our travel carry-ons and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like very little makeup. I've gone with no makeup these days, and used to have like makeup remover and mascara. All that's gone now, and I don't even care. That could be part of getting old too. Who knows?
Just wait till you retire.
She's retired.
I retired 2 months ago.
And congratulations!
Thank you. And Gene actually, we're going back and forth. To collect his full pension, which he has earned, it'll be in 2024. To me, that's a lifetime, because I'm home now, and it's like, what am I playing with? But you have to get into a routine, right? If you're alone, it's a very different experience. I might do a podcast on just that. But wait, I forgot to ask you. So when you do travel, do you also look towards medical facilities, right? Wherever you house it could be in a rural area, it might not be near medical care, or do you generally choose places that are more, I guess, accessible or urban? What's your plan like?
I don't think that we pick it with medical care in mind, but we like urban. We like more urban to begin with. Okay. So we don't want to have to depend upon a car, and urban is going to equal better medical facilities. So I think naturally just urban is the answer anyway for us, even taking out the medical picture. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's 100% fair. So I think some friends recently told us that one of the things they do when they get to a place is they sort of seek out what's urgent care look like in the situation. How am I going to get there? We haven't haven't really done that.
But we know that we should.
You're young. Yeah, you're young.
Yeah.
Well, we've actually had medical issues. I had to go see a doctor in San Miguel when we first showed up there back in November, December.
Actually, Tim had almost New Year's Eve 2020. Tim was in debilitating pain in Scottsdale. It turned out he was rushed to the urgent care. It turned out he had his first bout of diverticulitis.
Oh my goodness.
At that point, we realized we need to know where the hospitals are because when things go sideways and you're in a new place and you don't have friends, you need to know this. Now, meanwhile, you would think that maybe we learned from that lesson and now we know, but we don't. And so there's a lot going into this life because we're always planning where our next bed is. And it's not just our next bed. We're fully planned out through mid-September. Okay. So there's a lot of planning in this life. We love planning and you don't have to plan that far in advance, but the idea is like, you really need to be very engaged to know where you're going to sleep. It is not just like a given, you know where you're going to sleep if you have a home.
I believe, and I may be making this up, but I believe that a perk of our insurance is that they have like a concierge service. So if you need to find a doctor and you're in a certain place, you can just pick up the phone and say, I need to find.
We don't even know who to call. So
I believe that's a feature of our insurance.
Yeah. We're big Facebook users. So we're engaged in a lot of expat communities wherever we go. That would be my first line. If it wasn't like an emergency where I needed an ambulance, I would probably be posting in some sort of, we are very, very connected. It sounds like we're complete nincompoops. But we do. Those expat groups are helpful.
When we started this podcast and we were running low on guests, this was at the very beginning, we learned and joined all these different Facebook groups. They respond right away. So many people, because they're here to help each other, right? So it's that community of support, which is...
We're all about community.
Yeah, exactly, which is great. Gene?
You briefly mentioned the car a little while ago. When you house sit and someone has a car, are you allowed to use it?
It depends. But oftentimes the home will come with a car. So we've had instances where it does and instances where it doesn't. If we're going to be in a situation in an urban setting, we don't care. If we're going to be in a situation where we're isolated, it's important to us. We were in France in a rural situation 2 or 3 years ago that didn't have a car, and that was very isolating. So we wouldn't be signing up for a situation.
And that wasn't even rural. That was kind of suburban.
It was suburban.
But so it wasn't, there were no expats there. It wasn't that kind of a place. So it was just local people living their local lives. And we were very, as Tim mentioned, with no car, we were really isolated. So not only do we know that we like cities, but we'd rather not drive if we don't have to.
Right.
But so we like public transportation. We like walking. We like more densely populated areas with amenities and grocery stores and things, restaurants.
Here's a useful tidbit. So when we sold our car in November. So we signed up for a type of insurance. It's called a non-owner policy. And so if you don't own a car anymore, logic would suggest you don't need insurance anymore. Well, this non-owner policy provides us with liability coverage. So if we're in somebody else's car, we're in an accident and we harm someone, well, their insurance would probably cover the car. It might cover them or protect them, but it wouldn't necessarily protect us. So somebody could sue us if we hurt somebody. So this non-owner policy provides us coverage whenever we are, if we were to ever have an issue that we're.
And this is in the United States.
And this is obviously only in the States. That's right.
But that's great advice, though. I didn't know about that.
That's really good. Thank you.
It also helps us if we're renting cars in the U.S. because when you use the credit card insurance, that is collision. That's collision, but it's not. It shouldn't be liability. And liability is where the big bucks would be. If you had a lawsuit. So we have liability through this non-owner policy.
So at some point, will you guys look to not settle down, but have a home base? Can we talk about that?
Of course. So we are evolving. So one of my favorite places is San Miguel de Allende. As a matter of fact, we met Margaret from your show. We looked her up from the show and became friends with Margaret. Yeah.
Cool. Oh,
fun. So we do. So it wouldn't be unusual that we listen to one of your podcasts about a place we were going and then go meet whoever that was if they're in town. So we could be the reporter on the ground meeting the desire that people. But so we are open to it, but we're both in our young 50s. We think we'll be doing are moving around every 1-2+ months, maybe every, we think 10 years. The reality is we're incredibly adaptable and we change plans as we need. So I think that we do see that we might have maybe like 4 different places that we call home, and not like a home like traditional people, but like it's just a longer term. So maybe in the future, it just morphs into 3 months here, 3 months there. And we stretch out our time.
Everywhere we go, we play a game. It says, could we live here? So it's, we have this eye towards this wherever we are, and sort of think about that wherever we are. Right. And like Amy said, I think at some point I don't know that we'll ever own have a single place where we just live ever again. We'll be, I think, mobile forever.
And what you have said too, we're looking far, and we're big planners, really big, to the point where we're looking for our long-term care needs. And so now what we're looking at is Mexico for that.
Okay. Yes.
This is a very affordable place. So we know the United States is very, very, very expensive for any kind of long-term care needs. We've looked into long-term care insurance. It wasn't a fit for us. Our scope is Mexico. When we are ready to not be traveling, Mexico is the place where we're going to be settling. And we don't know where that would be yet, because it's a place where we'd pretty much be like home a lot. But someone have a full-time nurse or something like that at a significant savings than anything we would pay in the United States for less, for not even a full-time care.
We have some friends in their 70s, and we were visiting with them in San Miguel, and they just purchased a place, and it has a casita.
This is a separate little home on the property.
And we had this aha moment when we met with them, and that they were basically saying that, well, we could have somebody to care for us come and live in this casita, pay them a couple of $1,000s a month, and have phenomenal care here. Whereas in the States, at our house, in the States, that could be $10,000. I don't know. Easy $10,000 a month to have that sort of a care.
You have nice weather in San Miguel. So when they said that, we've been always wondering about this long-term care option. And that's part of why we spend so little of what we can, is because we don't know. So this really answered a question that's been nagging at us. It's Mexico.
Yeah. We interviewed someone who actually, and I can't remember if it was Mexico, because this person was up there in age, I'll say, compared to us. And he said that we said, well, your family is back in the United States. What are your future plans? Because he had worked in what happens upon death, the whole notion of, well, am I going to be alone? And he was very calm. And he said, well, I'm donating my body to the science studies up at this. It wasn't a university.
It was somewhere in South America, I think. Where it was.
Okay. It was so it was an educational institution. Everything would be taken care of. And he was really organized. I mean, kind of like us, maybe not as much to the spreadsheets or credit cards. But at the end of the day, it sounded like very calming to me. You know what I mean? It was something that you didn't have to worry about. It's one less thing to worry about. You know how some people say, I don't want to leave all this crap behind for our children to worry about. I want to make sure that everything is kind of in its home and we can continue to travel and enjoy and not worry. Right. So,
and when we were downsizing on our, we did videos on everything. We did a video about it, and people would say, you're lucky children that don't have to deal with your stuff.
Yeah.
A household of stuff. So it's that's where our name Go With Less comes from. So the fact that we're traveling with a lot of stuff, it is really only one piece of luggage. So the fact that we're so extravagant and it's one suitcase gives you some idea of where we are headspace. But we realize that like stuff is a problem. It's like and we have bigger houses for our stuff. We have and people say, I can't do the nomad life because I have too much. They'll say some version of like, I have too much stuff. This stuff holds us back. And so the Go With Less, our name is like, let free it.
Yeah.
It's holding you down.
It's good that you got that name and own it.
Yeah.
And
I agree with
You're probably too young, but George Carlin had a great skit about stuff. Yeah. If you
no. We know it.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
I agree with your philosophy where you said physical clutter equals mental clutter. I totally am on board with that. But as we speak, I mean, you can see the room that we're in has a lot of clutter. We also had a bit of a flood during Hurricane Ida back in September, where our basement, it has to be redone. Let me just say that. And so everything had to come up from the basement. And our home is not more than maybe 15 to 1,600 square feet.
Well, that's without the basement. Yeah.
Without the basement. So we don't have a lot of space. You know, you get used to the space that you live in, right? Now that the stuff from the basement is up here, I am starting to get anxious again. so I've been just getting rid of stuff. And every time I go to Salvation Army, I go, okay, one less bag.
It's freeing.
It is liberating. It is liberating. Absolutely. Let's ask you guys, what advice do you have for folks who like to follow in your footsteps or embark on a similar journey? What's your take?
I think we have a few different kinds of journeys. So one of them is early retirement. And that first step is to track every single penny that you spend. Mm-hmm. It can be with a piece of paper and a pen or electronic tools like Tim mentioned. We meet so many people who are ready to retire and they want our blessing, and which is crazy. And we'll say, how much do you spend? Like what's your spending? And over and over people say, and we have so many videos that say you have to do this. This is the first thing. They watch our videos and they don't know. And they say, well, here's how much I earn. I'm like, well, that has nothing to do with how much I spend. So it's shocking, actually, how few people who are in this space who want to retire. So we have this idea that is very strong that if you don't know what you spend, you cannot retire with security of knowing you're okay. Because even if you spend $1 million a year, you might have $30 million a year, but if you're spending $1 million a year, that might not work for you.
$30 million a year.
I'm sorry. You need to know what your spending is, because you can still. That's why celebrities go bankrupt. And we've seen friends who've had situations where you need to know your spending. So that's one. If you're interested in being a house sitter, we have videos on how to start with that. But one of them is start with local reviews. So it's really hard when you mention you just want the plants. Well, guess what? You're not the only person who doesn't want the responsibility of pets. So if you were just going to go into some we're in Paris watering plants, well, those are going to be really, really popular. So you do some local sits that are real quickie little weekend guys to get reviews. And so that would be one way to start. A way to start with all these credit card points and miles would be to start with a really killer card, like a Chase Sapphire Preferred might be a low entry price point with some nice little perks. As far as the nomad life is, get rid of your stuff. So instead of expanding your space as you make more money, and shrink it down, because as we mentioned on today's podcast, we have expanded to fill our space. We're not the only ones. So have your space be smaller. If your basement was out of commission, you would give away your stuff and you'd have less stuff. If your basement's back in commission, more stuff. And we have the same thing. This is us too. No, we're not judging. We have the same thing. So have less space equals less stuff. And we're not tiny home people either. Yeah. There's some middle ground. We're in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom now. This feels really nice. The 2-bedroom is actually where we just keep our stuff. It's like a closet, and then everything else is super minimal around the house here.
All right. Anything from you, Tim?
Amy covers it all.
Wait, I have one more question. So you guys had mentioned Mexico, and I remember in our emails that you had mentioned residency. Can you guys share with us what your thoughts are on that and where in the process you are?
Sure. So typically when you come into Mexico, you get what is known as a visa on entry, and they give you 180 days to be in the country, which is fine for most people. And then also, if you just wanted to reset that 180 days, all you had to do in the past was simply leave the country, come right back in, and you have another 180 days. Well, they started tightening down on this. We've heard that people will come in saying, I'm going to be here for 3 months, and they give them on entry, they'll give them 2 weeks.
Even with a flight booked home, even with 3 months later.
Oh, wow. And so that's obviously problematic. And so when you leave the country, if you have overstayed your visa, we've heard anything from no big deal, just get on the plane and leave, to there's a fine, $30 or something like that, to we're going to lock you up in detention for multiple days.
To let you back. So all over the place.
Never allowed into Mexico again. So there's a wide range of what might happen.
And this all just changed at the end of 2020.
And so this obviously set us our wheels into motion. What would it mean to become a resident? And so there are some parameters when it comes to being a resident. There's one, if you're of traditional retirement age and you have a pension, that's over a certain amount, and I don't know what the exact numbers are. It's not a problem at all to become a resident. If you have a certain number of assets in your traditional requirement age, it's no problem to become a resident. Okay. So for us, being a little younger it's a little bit more challenging in terms of we don't have traditional retirement income. We have enough assets that would meet the qualifications, but each of the consulates, to start this process of becoming a resident of Mexico, you have to be outside of Mexico. So if you're Canadian, you can come into the States and go to a Mexican consulate in the States, and vice versa. We could go to Canada.
As far as we understand. Yeah, we're not experts.
All we know is you have to be outside of Mexico. We've had lots and lots of conversations with a variety of people. We've been told anything from, I'm sorry.
We hired a lawyer.
Oh. so there's
Amy's like, we hired a lawyer.
So every consulate you go to seems to have different rules and how they're implemented. And also it's not only does the consulate have different rules, but the people that you interact with at the consulate seem to have different rules.
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
As a matter of fact, when we went to Texas, we decided we wanted to try and get permanent residency, because once you have permanent residency, you have it forever. You don't have to renew it. You just simply have it, is our understanding.
Nice. That's good to know.
With temporary residency, you get it and you pay a fee, and then in a year you have to renew it again. You have to be here during that renewal period. And then I think
3 years later, you
have to do it again. So it's
we don't know that we'll be here for sure.
That's right.
That month.
Yeah. So we don't know exactly when we're going to be in Mexico. So we wanted to try to have this permanent residency. So we decided to make this trip to Texas to become permanent residents of Mexico. And we had a lawyer sort of coach us through the right consulates to go to, ones that understand our circumstances, are going to be easier for us to work with.
The right documentation to bring with us.
That's right.
And we're in the middle of this right now.
We're in the middle of it. That's exactly right. So just in the price point, the current price point, and this includes the lawyer fee and everything for us to have permanent residence, it's about $600 each. And that includes the fees that we pay here in Mexico.
Very reasonable.
And the fees that
I was just going to ask. Yeah.
It's very reasonable.
It's worth every penny.
But where the United States, we can't be in the States for more than 6 months with our insurance, where we can't be in Europe for more than 90 days because of Schengen. And now we've just kind of still not all the way on the other side of COVID, but like we need a safe haven home.
Yes.
So so we listened to many of your episodes. We know a lot of people are expats. So we look at Mexico once we are approved as almost our home country.
Sure.
So it is our long-term plan. We come back over and over and over again. We love it here. So that allows us to come back for house sits, to have long-term Airbnbs without being worried that we're going to be turned away with 2 weeks when we have a 2-month house sit booked.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, it just gives us options is really what
I think it's wonderful that you guys did that. I mean, it's also such an affordable place. There's the medical,
the culture, the food, the culture, the weather,
the people,
and the proximity also.
Yes.
Depending on where you are, the proximity to the rest of the world. It's just all around a wonderful idea.
Yes.
Okay.
The time zone is great. So we love Mexico, and we're really happy that this will be our safe haven country.
So working through the process, we would absolutely encourage somebody to work with some facilitator, preferably a lawyer. So we had interacted with a variety of facilitators. Some of them are just people that happen to speak Spanish and understand sort of what's going on.
Bruce gave us a lot of advice.
Yeah, we started with one facilitator who's like, I've never worked with anybody who's younger trying to get permanent residency. And she sort of she was sending us down the wrong path, whereas the lawyer sort of helped us go down the right path. So
that's when the Facebook groups are really helpful. If you get a name mentioned like 3-4 times, bingo. Yeah.
And that's exactly. Yeah. A local friend here, one of our viewers, is who turned us on to our lawyer.
Oh, nice. So
it helps all the viewers
for that lawyer. Okay, great. Well, thanks again, guys, for spending all this time with us and all this valuable info. Let's stay in touch.
Yeah, and Tim and Amy Rutherford's YouTube channel is Go With Less.
Check it out. All right. Take care, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you know someone who's relocated for retirement and wishes to share their story with us, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Our email address is gg@retirethere.com. Our website is retirethere.com, and you may follow us on Twitter @retirethere_. Now, if you've liked our show, please subscribe and rate it in Apple Podcasts. In the meantime, be well.